Welcome to Powerless to Powerful with Angela Bennett, a show that brings a sassy mix of transformative advice on health, relationships, love, career, and mindset shifting, together with some fun and laughter. Powerless to Powerful with Angela Bennett begins now. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Powerless to Powerful podcast and show. Today, I have an amazing guest who I am so excited to talk with and to pick his brain and to hear his story of how he has come from powerless to powerful and how he is leaving his impact on the world today. So today we have Dr. Chris Leininger, and he is a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, a published author, co-author with me, myself and I actually, and a few other authors in The Greatness in You, and we'll talk about that later, and an educational speaker with over 17 years of clinical experience, and he's now sharing that knowledge, speaking at prestigious colleges of medicine, nursing, massage, and engineering. And we have the honor of having him here today with us on our show. So, Dr. Chris, I welcome you here. Thank you so much for your time. Can I hand the mic to you, and would you just tell us a bit about your story, your journey, where you came from, and how you ended up here on my platform today?
Absolutely. So, everybody has a story and a journey, and sometimes we end up places that we don't anticipate. Maybe we don't even know why. And prior to me working in the field of medicine, I was a commercial aircraft mechanic, and had someone at that time told me, "Oh, 10 or 15 years down the road, you'll be working in complementary or alternative medicine," I would have laughed at them. I would have been like, "You're out of your mind." And so that's kind of that's kind of how these things go. And then you discover a whole new world. I am a person of faith, so it doesn't matter whether I'm working on airplanes or I'm working in the field of medicine. The one thing that never gets old for me is that every time we think we understand things, another layer is revealed. And so that we will always discover that we just don't know hardly anything at all. And so it keeps us humble, but it keeps us looking and searching. And there's really no good answer or explanation unless we basically look to the heavens. And so that's kind of how I live my life. Believe me, I've had a lot of hard lessons along the way. I'm still a work in progress, but but that has been a very fundamental part of my journey. And actually, it was through working on airplanes that I met someone who shared their faith with me, and then that led to ultimately, at one point, me surrendering my life, and it definitely enhanced the quality of my life. And during hard times, I can't possibly imagine not having faith. I just can't imagine. In this world today, especially.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do wonder how people get through life without that. I mean, they call God a crutch. I don't know about you, but in my moments when I don't have my crutch, my God, my faith, there's always something else. It's a different kind of crutch. And the last one for me was alcohol and cocaine. So I know through my experience, through that destructive journey of using that as a crutch, I'd much rather my faith.
Yeah.
So, out of curiosity, how did you go from engineer, an aircraft engineer, correct me if I'm wrong, aircraft engineer, to a doctor and Chinese medicine and acupuncture?
Yeah.
There's a story there.
So,
Don't hold back on us now.
yeah. Well, I was perfectly happy in my work. I worked for one of the major airlines. I had flight benefits. I get to travel the world very inexpensively. And I was living in California. California is a very challenging state to live in if you want to be able to afford a home or to have a family. And at that time, I was newly married, and we were looking at what that would look like. And I was working as a commercial aircraft mechanic. My wife was a certified public accountant. We were barely getting by. So we're thinking, add some children into the mix, and then what? So, uh, so that doesn't say how I got into aircraft mechanic, but this was my field, and that's how I migrated to. I live in the Midwest. I live in a 100-year-old farmhouse on 36 acres with a view of a river, and it's pretty spectacular. But I'm 2,500 miles away from family, and that was the sacrifice that was made, to come here to start a family in a way that we thought would be nice for raising children. So because I could get an old farm here as opposed to living in a condominium in California, I got land and I started farming. And somewhere along the lines, I contracted. They didn't know at the time. It was 2 years of diagnosing me, but it turned out to be undiagnosed Lyme disease that had progressed until it had invaded my brain. And they did a brain scan, and they found out that the vessels in my brain were basically disintegrating. I had acute, vasculitis, and oral antibiotics were not powerful enough. So we had to do intravenous antibiotics to pass the blood-brain barrier, because sometimes medications that we ingest won't pass the blood-brain barrier. And I did 9 months of intravenous antibiotics in a battle to regain, my physical health. And it was in that time and how damaging the treatment was, although it was a necessary treatment, but it was a lot of things that go on when you're seeing that it's hurting you in another way. And so then at the end of that journey, they said, good news, you don't have Lyme disease anymore, but I was physically disabled. And so they gave me a handicap placard, and they're like, yeah, some people have chronic symptoms for the rest of your life, and we don't know why. You're probably one of them, and we got nothing more for you. In fact, that consultation cost me $275 to tell me they had nothing left to do. And so then you start seeking, and you start thinking, I've got to find answers. And then I wasn't really a natural health advocate or anything at that time, but just suddenly you're looking for reading what has helped people on their health journeys and what has possibility. And that's what led me to look into Chinese medicine, not so much as a profession, but as a potential tool to help me regain my health.
Wow, what a journey. I mean, it's hard to even fathom what that must have been like for you. And did you say your brain cells were being destroyed, deteriorating?
Yeah, all the vessels in my brain were deteriorating. I knew something was going on because it's a fairly straight road to the store from my home. It's a drive, but I was having trouble with directions. At one point, I was having some slurred speech, and I thought, no, there are things going on. And you go to the doctors, and they'll tell you, well, you look healthy enough. And then, and this is, as now that I've been in this field so long, I'm finding it's very common for doctors to assess based on what they see or what they perceive, and they make a lot of assumptions. And honestly, I guess we're going to jump right in here, but that happens the most in women's health. Okay. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. And so, there's easy ways to make excuses for things if you're a male doctor and you're treating women, or what the solutions are. And so, well, I'm going to jump right in here, Angela. We're going to go for it. All right. So,
Great, go.
so here's what happens. I'll give you an example. This isn't about my health. This is about health in general. But basically, if you have male and female physiology, the testes and the ovaries, ultimately, they're the same material. There is no male doctor that would ever suggest a solution for male health issues of removing the testicles, but we suggest all the time removing the ovaries or the uterus, and that's absurd. Okay, and so it's just an example of, I was in a completely different health battle, but they were looking at me saying, well, you look healthy. I used to do triathlons, and I'm like, I look healthy, but I'm telling you, I can tell something is wrong with me. And I think this is the same journey that a lot of women go through, where they're like, I know there's something physiologically wrong, but they aren't being heard or believed. And one of the challenges with Western medicine is that when we run labs, when we do x-rays, whatever, if it doesn't show up, then it doesn't exist, which is completely not true. It's just that the paradigm is that we wait until something shows up on a lab or an x-ray, and then we say it's disease. This is a problem because at that point, it's often so far gone that the way to the reverse that the damage has been done. And so basically Chinese medicine is focused on thinking of the body as an environment. So as we see things coming up, it could be something as simple as the skin. When I see people's skin, I look at the color, I'll look at the texture, and I'll be thinking, oh, they have heat in their system, or they have, a tendency to accumulate phlegm or mucus. And if we reverse that, we can prevent things like fibroids or cysts, or this could be in the breasts and the ovaries, whatever it happens to be. And so it's a very much precursor. Why are we going to wait until something shows up on a measurement? Why don't we see it as an environment and treat it before it accumulates and becomes something serious? That's what happened to me ultimately. Was that for 2 years I was begging doctors, please, let's figure out what's wrong. And I was losing more and more of my health, and until the point where I was having trouble speaking, trouble with directions. It was very, very, at that point, we're talking about power and power. I was powerless. I was like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm going to the experts and they have nothing to offer.
And that's, wow, that we are when, oh, sorry, I just need to get my words together. That's so much information. And you hit the nail on the head. We are powerless in those situations where we do know something's wrong, and it's like no one will listen. No one will dig any deeper. You're just giving me a pill or a Band-Aid for the symptoms. Can we not dig deeper and get to the root of this?
That's right.
To prevent it from coming any further. And that brings me to a conversation that we were having just prior to the recording starting. Could we dig into a little bit more of that around the effects of the cells and the cellular level and the stress that the effect that stress has on the cellular level and things that you were talking about earlier?
Absolutely.
I'll let you lead with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sometimes we know right and wrong. We know that certain conversations, certain tones of voice are harmful, and other ones are empowering. Just like a word of encouragement versus a word of negativity. So when I was in the doctorate program, one of the things that we studied that was just absolutely mind blowing to me was the concept of what we call epigenetics, and that's gene expression. And so gene expression is played out based on what we've experienced in life, the emotions that we carry, even from past events. And so there's a survey, and this survey anyone could look up online. It's called the ACE survey, ACE. And that survey is just a simple 20 questions that anyone can take. And when you do that, a lot of it has to do with childhood up to age 18. This is kind of mind blowing too. And this will expand into adulthood. But if you go through there and you're like, oh, your parents argued in your presence. They were loud and used, derogatory terms to one another. If there was any acts of violence there, if that was turned towards you, every time you check one of those boxes, the probability of that playing out in your life in some form, in gene expression that can lead to disease, it magnifies. And so it's pretty interesting. I know my own history, and I went through it, and I could have easily gone in. And now, this is not only for your physical health. This also is a calculation of probability that you will find yourself turning to things like alcohol or drugs, or other behaviors the likelihood magnifies over and over and over again every time you answer one of those questions. And so what does that look like is that this is so powerful. Let's say a child was exposed to domestic violence in the home and maybe also alcoholism. And then God forbid they were abused. What happens? Then you start doing this calculation that the likelihood that after age 50 of them developing diabetes and blood pressure or cancer is more than double. It's more than double. And they didn't do anything. They just happened to be in the presence of this negativity. And so I don't know if all your listeners are believers, but for us who are, is clearly just showing us how when we stray from this beautiful, beautiful world that was created to be a world of love, that it damages things, including our gene expression, and it can result in disease or behavior. I want to go on, but I want to make sure I create pauses for you if you have any thoughts, questions as we do this.
I thank you. I am okay. I'm just soaking all of this in and thinking about my life as well, and things that have impacted my life. And so I'm really intrigued by this questionnaire, and would like to do it myself. Or maybe I won't. I don't know. I don't want to know.
Yeah. There. Okay. So this is the beauty of this. This is because I gave this a lot of thought. Now, we can't change that, right? Some things we can't change. Just like when we make mistakes. You make a mistake on the job. Sometimes you don't recover from it. But here's the beauty of this: epigenetics are not our DNA; they're gene expression. And so we have a probability, okay, a likelihood of our body going in these directions. But when they did the studies and the research, what they also found out was that we actually can change that outcome. Okay.
Oh, thank
But
goodness.
we have to make conscious choices. Okay. We have to make conscious choices about what are we going to do with our past and with our future. And this is really powerful because all of us, at times, I mean, I for quite a period of time in my youth, I did not have a father, and when he was there, I have some pretty, hard memories, and I can easily, go forward and always feel that way. I can always feel like the kid that was abandoned, these things, and it takes away your confidence. Maybe you have more tendency to fear or lack self-confidence, and it affects all the choices we make in our life, including our career choices. Okay. But here's the beauty of this: is that in epigenetics, is that something as simple as having faith and prayer, focusing on the world you want to create with your children or your grandchildren, or a difference you want to make in the world, literally can wipe out the gene expression negative path that was caused by what you experienced prior. You can turn it in a completely new direction. And these things that I'm mentioning, this is not just concepts in Chinese medicine. These are not vague theories. They have done extensive research on this, and this can be backed up. They actually can measure this and see outcomes change. And so that's an important part of what I'm sharing here, is that please know that regardless of what your past is, whether those are choices a person made or whether they were choices you didn't even get to make when you were a child, today you get to decide, what do you want to do with your future gene expression? And things like love and helping other people to empower, or even sharing your story, can completely take your health at the genetic level in a completely different direction. That is amazingly powerful. I do believe it's a gift from above, so that whether things that we didn't even choose were in our life, or whether we made some mistakes, we get to start fresh and new, forgive and forget, because we serve an amazing creator. And I want to make sure we put that in. It's part of our design. Isn't that powerful? Part of our design is not just healing. When we cut, we heal. Part of our design is we can literally change ourselves, our genetic expression of ourselves, by having hope and being involved in prayer and following the moral compass. It's just an amazing thing we should all celebrate.
Oh, yes, we really should be celebrating that. And that reminds me of the experiment that, excuse me, that a scientist did. Uh, I'm thinking maybe China or Japan. I could have that. I could have that wrong. Don't quote me on that. But he did an assignment with an experiment, sorry, with his class, and they had 2 jars of rice, and one they would speak words of love and affirmation into, and the other jar they would speak condemnation and hate and all these horrible words. And the rice that they spoke love to, that was fine. It may, I think it stayed the same. I'm not sure what happened to it. I have to rewatch the YouTube. But the one that they spoke the negative and the hatred and condemnation to turned black and moldy. And it just goes to show the power of the tongue. And I've also, yeah, and I've also heard that when someone says one thing negative to us, excuse me, when someone says one thing negative to us, it takes about 16 positive things to counteract that negative thing. And when we think about or pay attention to the words that we say to ourselves on this video loop that constantly plays in our head over and over and over all day long, every day, they're not generally positive things. They're generally things that tear us down. And if you put those on a loudspeaker, someone would lock us up. You wouldn't say those things to your best friend. So I love what you're saying here, and taking accountability and responsibility from, yes, my past, my childhood, I had no power over, and it looked like this, but I get to choose what I do with my future.
That's right.
There's so much power in that. Back to you. Thank you.
Oh no, it's these are things I discovered through my studies and me being educated in the field of medicine, and then of course they applied to my own life, and then I always want to share them with other people because they're so empowering. If we think about when we speak to children, that then we connect to that we're influencing even potentially their future health conditions. Wow, talk about a stewardship issue. you know I mean, that's powerful. Then we got to check ourselves and go, I'm a little irritated with this child right now, but I got to be careful how to express that, because something that's said or done can even influence their health years down the road. And if we think about that, I think it really can help us to kind of like step back and think how we can change the world as simple as just by the way we communicate with one another and the future generations. And there's I mean, every day there's something terrible on the news, and a lot of it is involving troubled youth that don't understand where their place is, or that there's hope. And something as simple as this can literally change the world. Yeah.
This is so powerful, and that's key, isn't it? Like, if we can get to the kids and the teenagers before they enter into adulthood and change the trajectory of their life, we would have a different world, because they're our next generation. They're the next leaders
Yes.
of this planet, and they need us to step up into it. You're right.
Yeah. And they're potentially going to be our caretakers for us in our aging, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It all
Wow.
comes around full circle, you know. Yeah.
It really does.
Definitely. So that's so when we talk about that, so for sure a principle is environment, and I believe in design. And so if we think about um anything, if you think about architecture, and Frank Lloyd Wright had a certain style homes, and anytime you saw one, you knew that architecture, oh, that was from that designer. If we had a particular model of car, it was a Ford, or take a Corvette. It doesn't matter whether it was a 50s, 60s, 70s Corvette. You're like, that's a Corvette.
Mm.
So we were made by the same manufacturer as our environment, as the external environment. and we get to watch that and witness it, and then we can think about it. That's really the same way our body works. So if we see stagnant water and it grows, fungus and algae, or bacteria or parasites, then we have to start thinking that's true for our own body. And this is why certainly nutrition plays a big role in our health and activity, but also emotions and thinking, because it affects how well things flow through the organs versus locked down in the organs. The Chinese, we map out every organ system and emotions. And so there are emotions that hold grief. There are emotions that hold anger and suppressed emotions. There are emotions that organs that express joy. And I'm gonna share this with you. And I don't have a diagram, but I think people will be able to visualize. So hopefully most people are familiar with Christopher Reeves. He was the actor, the Superman, and his wife, Dana Reeves. So he had a tragic accident where he was paralyzed from the neck down. And so at that point, his wife was a very strong advocate for the entire family. And there was a lot of pressure, well, what's going to happen to him? Will she stay with him? You get the media causing all these problems. So in our medicine, the liver and the gallbladder, we call it wood, the wood element. This is where things will get contained or constrained. So did she have a reason to have anger? Absolutely. She had this wonderful life, this famous person, a handsome person. They had a great relationship. Now he couldn't even hug her. Did she have suppressed emotions? Absolutely, because you've got the media, is she going to be a gold digger? Is she going to stay with him? Now he's paralyzed, all these horrible things that she had to process. And so anger, suppressed emotions, and unfulfilled desires. Would she have chosen a different life? Would she have preferred for her husband to be restored? Absolutely. So all this locked down in that system, which is the wood element. So if we go around this circle, on the other side that comes across to balance out is what we call the metal element, and that is the lung and the large intestine. Now, the emotion that we assign to the lung and large intestine is grief. All right. So did she have a reason to grieve? Absolutely. All right. And grieving is metal. Metal cuts wood. So in the spring, grass and trees, they're growing at an accelerated rate, and we use metal to trim them down and cut everything and keep things balanced out. In the body, the emotion of grief can help. So the lungs, large intestine, primarily over here on the right, they come across, on the left, they come across to the liver, but they balance it out. So here's the circle. So hopefully it's hard to do without a diagram, but she chose not to express her grief because she had to be the strength for her family. And so all the emotions that were there in the wood element were not balanced with the metal by her crying, by her grieving. And what happened was that energy that was constrained in the liver and gallbladder came around. And where did she unfortunately tragically die from a disease? It was lung cancer. She was not a smoker. She never worked with asbestos. Okay. She constrained an emotion to be the strength for her family, and her body broke, and she developed a disease in the organ that needed to be the balancing organ. And how many times in our life do we do this? Yeah.
A lot. I know. I didn't actually know that story. I didn't actually know that she died.
Yeah. She passed away from lung cancer. They looked in her family history and everything, and it's like there's no medical explanation for this. But if so, what happens is this might be kind of a fun little exercise for everybody that's watching. Have you ever been frustrated and gone home and then you find yourself sighing a lot? Okay. And so we do these organ associations, right? Right. Okay. Why are we doing that? By design. We are using the diaphragm to express air, which is similar to grieving or crying. And when we do that, what happens is that the diaphragm compresses the liver so that the constraint, including the emotions that are in there, are forced to move on. Now, that's design. That was in anticipation of the world we would live in Even our own organ function can help us from our emotions, creating detrimental conditions in our body if we're willing to have emotional integrity and express our emotions. But the minute we break from design, the minute we ignore the way we were made, we start to have problems and there will be damage. We all have to get back to being able to have emotional integrity. And there's nothing wrong with crying, including for men, in appropriate situations if we want to stay healthy. Okay, and that's not the only emotion, but I'm just saying this picture was easy for me to describe, and I hope I did it in a way that it came out as there was some clarity.
There's a lot of clarity actually, and I was having there's two things I want to say. I was having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine yesterday because we were at church, and the beautiful man that was preaching, he was SAS military trained, and he was reliving he was sharing a story with us about how they had gone in and rescued some people. I won't say any more than that because I don't know I don't know. But he was moved by he was moved to tears. And like for me, I grew up with my father being moved to tears. So it's normal and natural for me to see a man cry. And I said to her, I actually find it such a beautiful, humble, and strong attribute and characteristic when I see a man move to tears, whereas a lot of women, I know that they don't cope with that. But the interesting thing is emotion, grief, crying, tears of joy. It's not a female attribute, it's a human attribute.
Correct.
So whether you are male or female, crying is a human thing. And the tears are salt water. Salt water is healing. And I know for myself, from the beginning of this year, I had suppressed 3 decades of trauma, pain, disappointment, heartache, all these things, shame and guilt. And there were just your explanation of your lungs holding grief makes perfect sense, because there were hours, days, weeks, if not months, that I spent on the floor in my office just completely cracked wide open and undone, sobbing, the messy, snotty, ugly cry, kind of snotty kind of cry. And when you are crying like that, you're doing the sobbing motion, that air is being exhaled, that emotion and stuck emotion is shifting and moving around. And I also did a few sessions of breath work to help move all that stuff, to shift it all. And it is so powerful. And now it even makes more sense of why that
Right.
that constriction that happens when we are in pain, when we're carrying that grief and sorrow, and then releasing it through the through that sighing. Right, even after you've had a really good cry, you're like, that feels
That's
so
right.
like, wow, that makes perfect sense. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that.
Yeah. By design, it's part of our physiology. I studied with Chinese doctors. Some had, a lot of them had spent time in monasteries, Taoist monasteries, Buddhist monasteries. So healing sounds is part of their medicine. And so they'll go through, and we know, like, just like in the Christian faith, there's psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Well, they have mantras, and those mantras, a lot of times are expressions of acknowledgement of something beyond themselves, but it's also just a way to use these vibrational rates to kind of release tension in the organs. And so it's very interesting. They would teach me, look, before you go home from clinic, you should go through this series of sounds, because it almost like let you kind of release everything from. It's hard not to be drawn into people's lives and stories when you're doing healing work, if you're committed. And everybody has some challenge they've been through, and you're having to think about it, and you're trying to help them treat through it. So it's very easy to just go home with that every day. And over years, that builds up as well. So they were trying to train, us to do things like breath work, but these healing sounds just to make sure we're kind of vibrating the organs so that all this stuff doesn't just kind of like start to settle in, and then it'll kind of release and move on. And so they're concepts that are more foreign to us, but once we hear them, we're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, you know.
And
And
I think if you get to have it, if you get to experience it as well, you can literally feel that stuff shifting and moving and releasing.
absolutely. So let's see. All right. So let's see if we can build off of this. So there are two primary driving forces in life: pain and pleasure. All right. And of course, we should always choose, as long as we stay within the compounds of moral compass, we should choose pleasure over pain as our driving force, right? Okay. But how many of us do? In other words, if you were at work and the boss said, hey, if you get all this, you can work 80 hours a week for the next 10 weeks and then you'll get a vacation. Okay. Are you going to do it? But if it's like, if this work's not done, you're going to lose your job. Which one's going to motivate us more? And we'll be like, oh, the pain, right? I don't know why. It tends to be human nature. But you notice that some people have figured out how to tap into this idea of pleasure, appropriate pleasure being a driving force, the reward of their focus, the reward of the outcome of their work, and including exercise, whether that be for weight management or regulating, blood pressure or whatever. Some people, when we watch the shows, all the weight loss shows, it'll always be, well, my 600-pound life. So what happened was the pain had to get to be 600 pounds of pain. And then suddenly it's like, we're going to do something. And I don't know why it's that way. But if we take and we weave this theme together of this concept of epigenetics and our past, but that we can change our future, and then we start thinking about our organs are even designed to help clear out so that we don't let things build up on us, and that we get to mentally choose whether we want to focus on the pain or we want to move towards pleasure. We can use pain as a driving force. We can say, I don't ever want to be there again, or I don't want to experience that again. So we have to create something new. Like if we had some memories from childhood and we don't want to have those, then we can create it for the next generation, and we can feel the reward of we're creating a different environment for the next for our children or our grandchildren. And so this is just how we make it all full circle, and it starts impacting our well-being, our emotions, our health. And that's pretty much my story. My story has always been, even after I learned concepts of pain and pleasure and the carrot and the stick, right? I always choose the stick. Why? I don't know. I don't know why, but the road to reinvention, that's been my road. Okay, it's always like, okay, here we are again. Something's changed. Like I had the health condition. I couldn't work on airplanes anymore. I got well. You know what? The airline went bankrupt. So it was like, okay, I guess I won't be going back there, even though I finally got to a certain level of health. And then that was when I was like, I'm already studying this medicine for my own health. Maybe I should continue on this path, and now I can use it to help others. So my life has been a constant, perpetual, road to reinvention. And I would definitely encourage anybody and everybody that it ain't over till it's over, and you can journey new paths anyway, every day, no matter what anybody told you, what you're capable of learning, of doing. You got to dig deep within, but it's all possible. It's all possible.
I could not agree more. I mean, look at my life, from prostitution to domestic violence to suicidal attempts, and I'm sitting here with you. Nearly almost 7 books under my belt. Like, anything is possible, and I truly agree with you with what you just said. And often destruction needs to come to our life to shake us up, and you said it earlier, actually makes us search for the answers. Because when I don't know, it's really strange. We can learn from these joyful experiences, and we can use that those joyful experiences and moments as motivators, but we do seem to be attracted more to the pain and the devastation and destruction to propel us forward. It's or
Right.
to shift in perspective. Amazing. On that note, just aware of time, and we'll have to wrap it up because I would love to have you back on the show because there's just so much more that you have that we want to know. If you have
Right.
the time, I guess, what are one of the most important lessons you've learned in life and something that you can leave our listeners with to empower them, to help them move towards their greatness?
Okay. So I am currently writing a book on time. Okay. Not time management, but on time. Okay. And I've been pondering and praying, and God is just continually revealing principles and concepts to me. We use all these phrases like we've lost time. Time, people retire and they say, why time? I thought I was going to have more time, but time is speeding up. And so there's all this idea of how do we manage time so we get the most of the time. And you blink and you're like another decade and another decade, and it's like we're grasping to try to get where we want to be, but somehow we're always behind time. So I'm not going to go into too many details on that, but here's what I want to say. Do just don't even over question this. Do the impossible. Okay. Do the impossible as early as possible, because if you don't, somebody else is going to anyways. Okay. Do you remember that at one time the idea that people could run a sub 4 minute mile was absurd? It was like no one's going to run under a 4 minute mile. Once one person did it, another person, another person, another person. So we have to be mindful of, I don't care if you're 20, 40, 60, or 80. Okay. One of my personal friends is a lady who's just turned 88. We were in the middle of a project. She came by and she saw we were working really hard. She's like, prayed for us right there on the spot. Okay. She left. She's a widow. She left. She knew we were going to be working all night. A couple hours later, the door knocks. She brought a meal for all of us. And she had said, oh, and don't worry, I called all my friends. We created a prayer circle. So we have you covered in prayer until this project is complete. Okay. 88. Okay. Now, she's not like afraid to drive in the dark, cook a meal, drive over as a widow. She's like pulling together her prayer chain. She is empowering. She's still making a difference. And I guarantee you that's affecting her gene expression. You know, she felt purpose. She felt reward. She connected with God. She has people that care about her. Here's what happened. It's so fun. As soon as our project was done, and we looked on the calendar, I think a patient canceled. We rarely get out of there early. And I asked my assistant, I said, call her right now, see if she's free. We took her out for dinner. Okay. Now we should all be so lucky when we're 88 to be called by our 60 or 70-year-old friends to go out for an adventurous, spontaneous meal. Okay. That's living. So I'm just saying time is never going to be working for us. Time is always going to be moving forward with or without us. Do the as possible as early as possible, or else somebody else will. And just, I mean, live big. Live big. That's it.
I love that so much. And thank you so much. What a woman. What a woman to have on your side. We all need someone like that.
Absolutely.
Now, Dr. Chris, your chapter is on page 152 of The Greatness in You. This is an incredible anthology with authors all over the world, and they've just brought all of their stories together just to prove to you again and again and again that it doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter. Your past does not define you. It refines you and creates you who you are and brings you into your purpose and your power. And what I love about your chapter is the title. Well, there's plenty that I love about your chapter, but the title, From Pain to Power. How perfect is that? And using our pain as our power, that's actually something that I've been focusing on recently. So when I read this, I was like, of course, that's what it's called. Of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's the driving force, So if we have pain, we either going to it's going to either define us, or we can use it or we can use it to define our own future and our own path. And so I'm like, I don't want to embrace pain, but I've learned to harness it and use its energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Dr. Chris, how can people contact you if they would like to get in contact with you?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I'm trying to keep things simple. So I do have an Instagram, which is just Dr. Leininger, and Leininger's Leininger. And then I have our clinic website, which is purehealthacupuncture.com. That is a US site. Those are the two best ways to reach out. We're going to be doing a lot of things next year. 2023, I think, is going to be one of our big years. We're going to do a lot of self-help courses and other things. So those are the two best ways to keep in touch.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I want to know about all of your courses and stuff coming up because I want to spend more time with you. I want my body to serve me well over my coming years. And there's something that just dropped into my spirit about doesn't matter how old you are, because if you're 20 years old and you have 5 years left, you're old. But
Yeah.
if you're 50 and you've still got 45, another 50 years, you're young. But we don't know. So whatever it is, Gary Vee, I heard say, I've got 3 words of inspiration for you. You're going to die. And I was like, whoa. But it's true. We don't know how much time we have left, and we each have a purpose that we need to, a unique purpose that needs to be brought to the world. And it's not about us. It's about serving others and reaching those who need us. And you do exactly that. And so, Dr. Chris, it's been just such an honor to have you on my show, to hear so much about what you have to give. And I would love, love, love to have you back at least one more time, if not 2, 3, 4 times, depending on how much time you have. And I know that my listeners will appreciate that as well and just glean so much wisdom from you. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you to all of our listeners who have participated today. And please share this message to as many people as you can, because the purpose of this show and this platform is to help others move from powerlessness to powerful so they can leave an impact on this planet, because we need you. We need your purpose. The world is better because you're in it. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Would you like to say anything else before we leave?
Thank you for having me. I welcome coming back. I'm open to any topics. It can be mindset. It can be health. It can be health related. It can be, anything, nutrition, whatever, or life stories. But I just want to reinforce that. The design requires a designer. It doesn't matter what you look at. You're always going to see design. It's because we were made by the same manufacturer. And I know sometimes people struggle. Even when our life gets rough, sometimes we struggle maybe with our faith, but all you have to do is look out the window and see design, and you'll be reminded that no matter whether it seems like anything makes sense or not, we can't deny that there's design. And if there's the design, there's a designer. So we just as well be in relationship, because everything's going to be better if we are.
Perfect words to wrap this up on. Thank you so much. I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Follow Angela on Facebook and LinkedIn at Angela Bennett, on Instagram at AngieB_transformations, or visit angieb.com.au. And remember, your past does not define you, it refines you.